He was once a hero. Now Michael Harris is just a ghost wandering the rain-soaked streets, homeless, broken, invisible. At the courthouse, eyes burn with disgust, ignoring the man beneath the tattered coat. But his story? It's a powerful reminder that even forgotten souls carry the weight of courage and sacrifice. If you believe in truth and justice, hit subscribe and follow this unforgettable journey. The rain fell harder now, a relentless drum against the cracked sidewalks of New York. Michael Harris pulled his battered baseball cap lower, hiding the hollow in his eyes. Every step toward the courthouse was heavier than the last, not just from the weight of his soaked coat, but the crushing burden of shame and years of silence. His mind raced, dragging memories like broken chains behind him. How did it come to this? He wondered. The war, the camaraderie, the brotherhood, all erased by time and neglect. In Bosnia, he was a sergeant, a protector, a man who saved lives in the chaos of shelling. Here he was just the homeless guy, a nuisance to be ignored or scorned. He reached the courthouse steps. A cold gust of wind swept mud from his torn boots onto the pristine marble. Heads turned, whispers erupted. There he is. Look at that mess. He smells awful. Michael heard every word, the venom slicing deeper than any bullet wound. His heart pounded, not from fear, but the sting of invisibility. He was a ghost haunting a city that forgot him. Inside, the courtroom felt suffocating. The polished wood, the marble columns, the hushed voices, none of it was meant for someone like him. As he shuffled to the defendant's chair, a woman in an expensive purple velvet dress recoiled, covering her nose. A man in a tailored black coat turned his gaze away, lips curled in disgust. God, what happened to me? Michael's thoughts screamed. Inside his head, his hands trembled, dry and cracked. He clenched them tightly, desperate to hold on to whatever dignity remained. The gavel slammed down. Order! The voice was sharp, cold. Judge Albert Grant's stern face looked down, unreadable. From Afuangde, the prosecutor's table, Ryan Owens stood, his tailored suit perfect, his red tie sharp like a blade. His eyes gleamed with cruelty as he pointed at Michael. This man, Ryan declared, voice slicing through the silence, is a burden to society. A man who could not even save himself. A threat to public safety and a symbol of decay. Michael flinched. His throat tightened. He glanced at his attorney, Marina Dawson. She held papers but didn't look his way once. Ryan's words echoed in the courtroom. 3 days ago, in a drunken rage, Michael Harris attacked a security guard at Sunrise Mall. Why? Because he was asked to leave. Gasps rippled through the crowd. A woman whispered, "How awful." Michael's lips moved silently. No, that's not the whole story. But his words vanished in the cold air. Marina bowed her head. The defense was finished before it began. Does the defendant wish to speak? The judge asked. Michael stood, voice shaky. I just want to... Ryan cut him off with a sweeping gesture. This court will not waste time on excuses. Laughter. And snickers rose from the back. A young cop whispered to his partner, "Throw him in a mental hospital. Not worth the taxpayers' money." Michael sank back into his chair, head bowed. The room closing in like a tomb. From the rear door, Officer Paul Green entered, dumping a torn plastic bag on the table. Michael's belongings, a faded military jacket, a broken photo frame, and his battered backpack. Michael's chest tightened as he mouthed, "Please don't take it." Ryan sneered. "Confiscated. Items related to the crime will be stored." "No, it's not a crime item," Michael pleaded, voice cracking. "It's my life." No one responded. The court clerk read the charges coldly. Michael Harris, assault. On a law enforcement officer disturbing the peace. Recommended sentence 3 years. The gavel fell again. Michael sat frozen, eyes locked on the floor. Outside the courtroom, footsteps echoed. Voices whispered. A small boy tugged his mother's sleeve. "Mom, why is that man so dirty?" "Don't look, honey." "He's a bad man," she whispered. Each word was a knife, each glance a lash. But inside, Michael, a storm brewed. Memories of freezing nights in Bosnia, the faces of the children he saved under fire, the camaraderie that once gave his life meaning. He remembered Lieutenant Albert Grant, trapped beneath rubble, and how he risked everything to pull him out. And now, this. The backpack on the table, soaked with rain and crushed, was all that remained of a man who once mattered. 30 minutes later, the judge returned, voice grim, as he announced the sentence, 3 years at Southfield Correctional Facility. Michael's lips quivered, a desperate plea rising. Please, just one word. But the judge's reply was cold, final. This session is concluded. 2 officers roughly cuffed Michael, dragging him from the courtroom as cameras flashed, capturing the fall of a forgotten soldier. His whispered words followed him. My backpack, please. The van door slammed. The metallic clang echoed like the last breath of a life fading away. David Morgan adjusted his uniform nervously as he stood near the courtroom door. Fresh-faced, barely 6 months on the force, David had seen a lot, but nothing quite like this. The man they called Michael Harris, the defendant, was unlike any other case he'd encountered. To the world, Michael was just another vagrant, a troublemaker dragged through the system. But David couldn't shake the uneasy feeling in his gut that there was more beneath the surface. As Michael shuffled into the courtroom, soaked and broken, David noticed the old military jacket poking out from the plastic bag with his belongings. There was something about the man's eyes, haunted yet fierce, that made David's chest tighten. The courtroom was a cold place for a man like Michael, but David watched as the whispers and snickers sliced through the air, poisoning the atmosphere with contempt. From his vantage point, David overheard the prosecutor's sharp words that cut through any hope of fairness. A burden on society, a symbol of moral decay. The judge's quick nod and the prosecutor's smirk left David feeling sick. The man wasn't just being judged, he was being crushed. David glanced at his partner, a hardened veteran of the force, who shrugged dismissively. He's just a bum, not worth the trouble, the partner muttered. But David couldn't agree. He had grown up in a small town where respect for veterans ran deep. His grandfather had served in Vietnam, and stories of sacrifice had shaped his childhood. Watching Michael, who barely had the strength to speak, silenced by the courtroom's cold indifference, David felt something else: guilt. How easily they'd forgotten the man's past. How quickly they'd reduced a soldier to nothing. When Michael was handcuffed and dragged away, David's eyes caught the look on his face, a flicker of desperation, and then, that haunting whisper. My backpack, please. David felt an ache in his chest. That backpack wasn't just old clothes and worn papers. It was Michael's identity, his history, the last thread tying him to a life that had meaning. After court, David followed the procession to the van. He stood silently. As Michael was pushed inside, hands bound and head bowed, the rain still fell outside, and David caught a glimpse of the torn backpack left abandoned on the courthouse floor. He knew, deep down, that this man's story wasn't over. That night, as David sat in his small apartment, he couldn't shake the image of Michael's defeated figure. The injustice gnawed at him. He thought about the war stories Michael must carry. Memories of freezing nights, gunfire, and comrades lost. David wondered what it felt like for Michael to be sentenced like a common criminal, stripped of dignity and respect. David's thoughts drifted to his own father, a retired sergeant who had once told him, "No one should fight alone." That simple phrase echoed now in his mind as a question: who is fighting for Michael? The next morning, David returned to the station, eyes heavy but resolve firm. He found a moment to speak quietly with the court clerk, Lucy Martin, who had a troubled look on her face. They exchanged few words, but David could see the conflict in her eyes, the burden of a system that had failed a man like Michael. Later, during a break, David caught a glimpse of Michael through the barred windows. of Southfield Correctional Facility. The prison loomed cold and unfeeling, a far cry from the battlefield where Michael had once been a hero. David wanted to reach out, to offer some kind of hope or humanity. But the harsh reality was that this place crushed hope. Inside the facility, Michael's world was shrinking fast. His once proud spirit was battered by brutal guards, hostile inmates, and the choking loneliness of prison walls. David knew the coldness of those halls wasn't just physical. It was a violence against the soul. One afternoon, David overheard a conversation between officers mocking Michael, calling him a lost cause. He clenched his fists, anger rising. He wanted to say something, to stand up, but fear and protocol held him back. Instead, David began quietly investigating. He started requesting files, trying to understand the full story behind Michael's trial. What he uncovered shocked him. The trial had been rushed, key evidence ignored, and Michael's military service deliberately left out. David's heart ached as he pieced together the truth. Michael wasn't just a homeless man accused of a crime. He was a decorated veteran, betrayed by a system that should have protected him. That night, David sat alone, staring at the files. He knew he couldn't let this go. Somewhere deep inside, a flicker of hope was kindling, a hope that maybe justice could still be found for Michael Harris. David's internal struggle, his guilt, hope, and quiet defiance, adds a powerful new lens to Michael's story. It builds tension and pushes the narrative forward, showing that even in darkness, small acts of courage can spark change. Michael Harris lay on the narrow, stained mattress of his cell, the faint glow of the moon slipping through the barred window, casting long shadows across his gaunt face. His body ached, not just from the bruises and cuts, but from the crushing weight of loneliness and betrayal. Every creak of the prison echoed inside him like a judge's gavel, pounding down on his fading hope. The cold walls closed in. The stench of mold, sweat, and desperation was suffocating. Michael's thoughts spiraled, chasing memories he wished he could forget but couldn't. Bosnia. The cold nights huddled with brothers in arms. The deafening roar of artillery. The faces of the children he had saved from the chaos. And the look in Lieutenant Albert Grant's eyes when Michael risked everything to drag him from the rubble. But here, in Southfield Correctional Facility, none of that mattered. A sudden, loud thud jolted Michael from his thoughts. The cell door slammed open and Officer Anthony Scott strode in, his face a mask of indifference. "New cellmate," he grunted, motioning to the bulky figure behind him. Andrew Ross. The name sent a fresh chill through Michael's spine. Andrew was everything Michael was not: intimidating, cruel, with a buzz cut and a snake tattoo coiling around his neck. His grin was sinister, a predator sizing up its prey. "Old man," Andrew sneered as he stepped inside, boot nudging Michael's leg. "Hope you know your place." Michael didn't answer. His voice was gone. Only a hollow weight sat in his chest. Andrew's shadow loomed over him like the dark cloud that had followed Michael since the trial. The first night passed in a tense silence, broken only by Andrew's chainsaw-like snore. Michael whispered in his sleep, "Please don't take it. Please don't take my backpack." The next day, the prison's brutal routine dragged Michael into another day of hell. The sirens blared, the cold cement bit into his worn shoes, and the cafeteria's stale air clung to his skin. Andrew followed, mocking him openly, snatching the bread from Michael's tray, taunting him as others laughed. Michael clenched his fists, but he knew resistance would only make things worse. Samuel Torres, a sly inmate with sharp eyes, approached, leaning in with a cruel smile. "Heard you were a soldier once, is that true?" Michael's silence was his only answer. "Glorious past, huh?" "Now just a joke," Samuel chuckled, drawing laughter from the table. They bet on how long Michael would last. 3 months, 2 months, maybe less. Michael felt like prey in a world that had forgotten mercy. Later, in the labor office, Michael's trembling hand signed a behavior agreement. The cold eyes of Officer Bella Jameson pierced through him. "No disturbances, no complaints," she warned flatly. The consequences were clear. Walking back, Michael passed the training yard where inmates brawled under the watchful eyes of apathetic guards. Blood, fists, and cruelty were daily currency here. That night, Michael stared at the cracked ceiling. Andrew's snores filled the silence, punctuated by distant curses and banging. Michael's hand hovered over his chest, aching for the backpack, the last shard of his life. "My memories," he whispered, voice breaking. They took everything. The following day brought a rare flicker of hope. Michael was called to the visitation room, surprised to see young Officer David Morgan sitting behind the glass. David's eyes held hesitation and regret. "Mr. Harris," David said softly, "I don't know why I'm here, but I saw what happened. I'm sorry." Michael's eyes, bloodshot and tired, searched David's face for truth. It was a weak apology, but for the first time, someone looked at him like a man, not a criminal. David leaned in, voice dropping. "Your backpacks, I think it's still in the courthouse evidence room. I'll try to get it back for you." Hope stirred, fragile but alive. But darkness quickly returned. Andrew, drunk and angry from a lost gambling bet, stormed into the cell. "You brought me bad luck," he snarled, shoving Michael into the wall and demanding an apology. Michael trembled but stayed silent. Andrew's punches and kicks rained down. "Get up, soldier boy. Fight like you did back in the day." Michael clutched his abdomen, pain stabbing through his body. But worse than the physical blows was the crushing humiliation. The feeling that even his past courage was worthless here. Days blurred into nights. Michael moved like a shadow through the prison, avoiding confrontations, hiding his wounds, and sinking deeper into despair. One morning, as the line formed for breakfast, Andrew slapped Michael's shoulder mockingly. "Good morning, old buddy." Michael kept his head down, clutching a bowl of watery porridge and a stale piece of bread. The cafeteria was a battlefield of its own. Charles Vega, a vicious inmate, blocked his path, growling, "This is my seat, old fart." Michael retreated, forced to sit on the cold floor in a dark corner. Each spoonful of porridge scraped his throat like shards of glass. Laughter erupted as Andrew pulled a chair across from him, feet resting on the table. "Look at this, guys. Our general's eating like a mangy dog." The humiliation was endless. One sharp shove sent Michael crashing into a steel table corner. Blood trickled from his forehead. Officer Ralph witnessed the attack but turned away, indifferent. Michael crawled to his feet, pain radiating, no hand reaching out to help. The loneliness was suffocating. That night the shadows grew longer in Michael's mind. The worn backpack, the photo of his comrades, the medal from a fallen friend. They were gone, confiscated and forgotten. Inside him a desperate fire flickered. He whispered into the cold darkness, "I'm nobody, just a ghost." But even ghosts can fight to be seen. Michael's story isn't just about a broken man. It's a battle for dignity in a place designed to erase it. Stay with us. Hit subscribe to witness his struggle and the flicker of hope that refuses to die. Months had passed since Michael Harris had first been dragged into Southfield Correctional Facility, a man broken in body, spirit, and hope. But in the quiet corners of the prison, where shadows clung and voices rarely lifted, a small miracle was quietly taking shape. A redemption not just for Michael, but for justice itself. Judge Albert Grant sat in his chambers, the weight of decades pressing down on his shoulders. He stared at the file in front of him, Michael's file, now unredacted, filled with truths buried beneath layers of bureaucracy and apathy. The man he had sentenced so swiftly, so coldly, was not the criminal he'd been led to believe. He was a hero, a soldier who had saved Grant's own life during a brutal battle in Bosnia. The realization pierced his conscience like a lightning bolt. Grant's knees hit the courtroom floor as he publicly bowed before Michael, acknowledging the grievous mistake. The courtroom fell silent, then erupted into a wave of applause, hope, and regret mingling in the air like thunder before a cleansing storm. For Michael, that moment was more than vindication. It was a resurrection of his dignity. When the worn, rain-soaked backpack was returned to him, the fragile vessel holding Photographs, medals, letters, and memories. Michael finally allowed himself to feel the weight of his own worth. Tears streamed freely, not from sorrow but from the relief of being seen, truly seen at last. But the story did not end in that courtroom. Across New York, news spread of the wrongful conviction. Media outlets highlighted Michael's journey from decorated soldier to broken prisoner, and finally to a man reclaimed by justice. In the quiet of his new apartment, bathed in morning sunlight overlooking Central Park, Michael spoke during a radio interview. His voice, once hushed and broken, now carried the strength of a man who had fought not just wars overseas, but a far crueler war at home. "If I could go back," Michael said, eyes distant but steady, "I'd still save him. Because saving others isn't about recognition. It's about doing what's right no matter the cost." That ethos, integrity over reward, had carried Michael through his darkest days. It was the same courage that led him to hold on to his memories, his identity, even when the world tried to strip them away. The Department of Defense honored him in Union Square, where hundreds stood and applauded. The man once mocked, discarded, and silenced was now a symbol of resilience and the power of human dignity. Even those who had shunned him before stood hand in hand, a testament to the redemptive power of justice and gratitude. But the story also carried warnings. Ryan Owens, the prosecutor who had manipulated the truth for political gain, was disbarred and faced legal repercussions. Andrew Ross, the brutal inmate, watched in silence from prison walls. The system had almost swallowed a hero whole, blinded by prejudice and ambition. Judge Grant's public apology was not just an act of contrition, but a call to the entire society. Justice is more than laws on paper. It is humanity in action. It requires courage to admit wrongs and the will to make them right. Michael Harris had been broken. He had been lost. But through unwavering integrity, a flicker of hope, and a long overdue reckoning, he was restored, not just in law, but in the hearts of those who witnessed his journey. His final words in that courtroom echoed beyond the walls. Gratitude can save a lost soul, but justice, that's what saves a society. And for a man who had once been invisible, that truth became his lasting legacy. What can we take from Michael's story? It's a reminder that dignity can never be measured by circumstance or status. Every person, regardless of their fall, deserves to be seen, heard, and respected. It shows the devastating cost when society chooses indifference over empathy. Most importantly, it challenges us to stand up, not just for ourselves, but for those who have been forgotten. Because true justice is a shared responsibility. It's the courage to face uncomfortable truths and the determination to restore what's been broken. Michael's life was scarred by war and betrayal, but it was healed by justice and compassion. And in that healing, we find the true power of humanity. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe. Together we can keep telling stories that remind us what it means to be human. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next story.